All right. Here we are on the Sort of Sports Podcast, episode 48 now. And I actually have been tossing around an idea for something new I was thinking about doing. Basically, scheduling-wise, it's looking like episode 49 will be my NBA Conference Finals episode. And then episode 50 ever of the pod, pretty exciting. We're going to hit a nice big fat round number. Episode 50 is going to be the NBA Finals episode. So that'll be pretty exciting. Hopefully, that's going to have Nikola Jokic in it. I don't know if I'm going to touch on NBA first. I think really today's episode is really focused on a big part, and I'll get that to it. Oh my! I'll get to that in a moment. I mean, you also could have just read the title of the video, which I know what I'm going to title this. So I guess you know that I'm doing a Guardians of the Galaxy 3 review. But let's act like you didn't know that, and this is a complete surprise. So let's go back to what I was saying, which is I'm tossing around currently an idea of something new I was going to do for the pod. And it'd be like one of those different episodes, like a sort of award show I'm tossing around. So if I decide to do that, obviously it'll be posted. I don't know what. Moral of the story is, I'm jumping around here. Moral of the story is that I've been thinking about something new, and so we might be having something really special, upcoming, a new type of thing upcoming. It'd be like a yearly event. It's kind of like the Sort of Sporties for movies. The Sort of Sporties, is my award show for movies. So I'm thinking about doing something similar to that, and we'll get back to that. But that won't be for a couple episodes. So I think episode 50, the big fat round number, there's nothing specially planned other than doing the NBA Finals preview. That will be episode 50, will be the 2023 NBA Finals. And that would be really cool if it's Nikola Jokic, because over the course of the podcast, we've seen me come from being a sort of Jokic hater to him probably being my second favorite player in the NBA. I think I love him that much at this point. So, yeah, we'll touch on Jokic and the NBA. Should I start with them? No, I want to start with the Guardians of the Galaxy. So, here we are. This episode is mostly here to focus on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Just came out, today's Friday the 12th. It came out exactly a week ago. I went and saw it on the 6th. And, I think if you've been listening to this podcast for a bit, you definitely know how I feel about the Marvel movies, which is, since Endgame, I think they've had one really good one, and that's No Way Home. I was a huge No Way Home guy. I, at the time, said it was the best MCU film. I don't stand by that. I honestly think Guardians 1, which I originally ranked as number 2, I would put that at the top. I think the top-level MCU movies are Guardians 1, Infinity War, Endgame, and No Way Home. Those would be my top 4. And honestly, I think this one, too. I think Volume 3 is on that level. The next level below that would be like Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man 1, Avengers 1, and is there something I'm forgetting that I really like there? I think probably Winter Soldier would probably all be in that next level, I'd guess. I think somewhere around there. But regardless of all that, I obviously just kind of said how I felt about it. I went into this kind of concerned because Guardians 2 is not as good as Guardians 1, if I'm remembering correctly. But I got to be honest, guys, I don't think I've watched Guardians 2 in probably 2 to 3 years. It's been a little while since I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Hasn't been that long since I watched Guardians 1. But I was really excited because I really, trust James Gunn's ability to pump out a really good superhero movie. I loved The Suicide Squad. And, even though they didn't make the most money, I was a huge fan, like a lot of people. So I went into this with high hopes, and I'm like, okay, well, if this isn't good, what is the point of the MCU at this point? Because this should be good. This has a chance to be the MCU's best trilogy. Its most cohesive, concise, perfect trilogy. And that is how it is. I think this is the MCU. I would consider, Avengers and then Infinity War and then Endgame, like Ultron's kind of like a filler story. So if you consider the first Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame a trilogy, and you consider this a trilogy, I think this is a stronger trilogy overall, but they're completely different things. The Avengers movies are like these massive events, whereas the Guardians were kind of like this little MCU side story that just became, really popular to the point where it feels like it's a main attraction. I think it's really interesting. It was The Ringer had an article that's like, it's really weird that the MCU's kind of crowning achievement is this list of D-tier superheroes that became super beloved and popular. And I think that's really interesting. Like that the MCU, I think this is one of the best things the MCU's ever accomplished is making the Guardians of the Galaxy one of Marvel's most profitable properties. And a lot of that you have to attribute to James Gunn. I mean, we'll get into, I think if I'm organizing this, my mother always says when she listens to the podcast, she appreciates when I'm a little more organized. So we'll talk about DC and everything he's going to be doing over there and James Gunn's future here in a minute. Well, not in a minute. Probably a lot of minutes down the line. I got to get through my whole review of the film. But he's very good at taking these little-known characters and making them beloved and making them, some of your favorites. I mean, Star-Lord is probably one of my favorite superheroes. And the Guardians films, if you said, what is your favorite superhero film? I honestly think at this point Guardians 1 might be. I rewatched Guardians 1 this last week. I just finished it today. I started it Tuesday night, and then I fell asleep actually during it, which doesn't sound like high praise. I love that movie. I was just kind of whipped. So I didn't expect myself to fall asleep on the couch, but I did. So I fell asleep, and then I went up to bed, and the day I finished it. And, Guardians 1, at the time, I was like, okay, I've always kind of, not always, but for a while, I've considered this one of the best MCU movies as a hold up. And watching it, finishing it today, I was like, yeah, this might flat out be my favorite superhero film. It is up there with Spider-Man, No Way Home, the first two Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming. I like how I named 4 Spider-Man movies my favorite superhero films. Infinity War is one of my favorite superhero films. I really should watch Logan. I'd probably like it. But I think Guardians of the Galaxy 1 legit might be my favorite superhero movie. And I think this one has a chance too, Guardians 3. I guess right now I'm really introducing my review with talking about the Guardians series as a whole. So if we're doing laying out like how I'm organizing the pod today, we're doing an intro where I talk about the Guardians films as a whole, then I'll dive deep into this film. And then at the end, I'll talk about James Gunn and the MCU's future. Separately, obviously. James Gunn, respectively, because James Gunn is a different future than the MCU. And that's starting to feel like it's kind of a good thing, because I'm really excited for what he's going to be doing. But I will say it's really interesting going back when I was watching Guardians 1. Now there's lines and there's moments that the new film, Volume 3, completely recontextualizes, or just makes you go, oh, well, no wonder he said that. And that's really cool. It's very apparent that Gunn, from the beginning, had a relatively clear vision of where these characters were going to end up. And even though, obviously, in his original plans, Gamora wasn't going to die like that was told to him by the Russo brothers. I saw an interview where the Russo brothers told him, hey, are we okay to do this in Infinity War? And he's like, yeah, I can work with that. I was completely happy with what they did with Gamora in this movie. I liked it because there is a part of me that's like, yeah, the Guardians are a part of the larger MCU. Like, if you sat down and you watched Guardians 1 through 3, and you didn't watch any other MCU movies, you could completely get what's going on. But, they, in the same sense, they are a part of the larger MCU as a whole. So it makes sense that they had an effect from Endgame. I mean, it'd be weird if Endgame goes on and the Guardians were completely unchanged from it. I mean, it's the big, event in the MCU, but realistically, none of them are that different other than the Gamora situation. So I completely get, I know some people, that was one of their big takeaways is I wish there was more to do with Gamora, but I actually really liked what they did in Volume 3 with Gamora and that whole situation. I was very happy with how they handled that. And when I dive more deeply into the movie itself, I'll touch upon that more. But I guess right now I'm looking at it from the trilogy as a whole. I think next I'm going to watch Guardians Volume 2, and then I'm going to watch the Holiday Special, and then I'm going to watch The Suicide Squad, and then I might watch Peacemaker. I think I might just do a whole run of all James Gunn's superhero stuff, because this movie really impressed me. If you want my quick review, it's that it is one of the best MCU movies, and you will like it. I mean, Guardians 1 was such a big hit because it was unique and it was different and it was interesting. And this is all that again, except now with a much more serious and I want to say climactic, it has a sense of finality. It feels like the end point. The movie ends with every character being at their character's end point, or at least a point that you're happy to see them, the movie. All right. I'm just going into spoilers. There's no point in me jumping around. When the movie ends and Rocket's there leading the team and Star-Lord is with his father, I could see more of Rocket in the New Guardians. I could see more of Star-Lord with his father. I could see more of Gamora and the Ravagers. I could see more of Drax, running the Nowhere Now with Cosmo. and Sean Gunn. I can't remember his character's name all of a sudden. I feel like an idiot, but I can't. And then, I could see more of him and Nebula working together. I could see more of Mantis doing her own thing. I could see more of Groot being with Rocket. Sorry, I forgot about Groot for a minute. I could see more of all that, but I don't need to. Like, I'm very happy with where we ended with all these characters. I think it was really cool how he wrapped everything up. And to touch on the Gamora thing I was just getting into earlier, I think it's really interesting. It's really, it's obviously an unfathomable situation. It's a very fictional character situation where the idea of, like, you watch somebody die and then, like, an alternate universe person then comes in. But I thought it was a really interesting idea to explore how that would affect Peter Quill. Because through all these movies, we've seen from the first one, from the minute he sees Gamora, he's into her. And obviously, at that point, it's just like an attraction. It's not like he loves her. But throughout the first movie, by the end, they get to the part when they're on the ship, and he's telling her, and he's like, well, I went to save you. And then she cuts him off because she's worried about the orb, and that's a fun moment. But, the whole series, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, has been, we've seen him fall in love with Gamora, and then, we've eventually seen her reciprocate that same love in Infinity War. And so now seeing how that being taken away from him affects him, I think was one of the most interesting things they could do. Because I was really worried going into this that, we were just going to get new Gamora fall in love with him, hooray, everybody's happy. And I'm so glad they didn't do that, because that would have felt wrong. That would have felt gross. It's like, no, that's not her. That's weird. And it wouldn't have felt right. And so the fact that he didn't let that happen, like James Gunn when he wrote it, I think it's a really good call. And I really liked how that played out. And I like the fact that at the end, there's no real happy ending for Star-Lord in that sense. I mean, they're just backs to each other. And she has the line where she goes, I bet we were fun. And he goes, you wouldn't believe it. And it was like a very sad moment. But it's like, yeah, there's nothing he can really do to fix it. And I think that's really interesting. The idea that no matter, like, Star-Lord, at the end of the day, he can't fix it. He can't fix what went on. And he has to accept that. And even though it's a driving force of this movie, that loss and all the losses he's experienced over his life are driving him to save Rocket in this movie, I think that's a really interesting idea. That he's driven by all these other losses to help save his best friend, or as Drax keeps telling him, his second best friend, Rocket. I think that was really cool. It was really well written. Like, it makes it so much more. I think that's the thing with all these MCU movies. I've been concerned because they just feel like they don't have a lot of heart. And here comes James Gunn showing it's like, yeah, my movie's got a hell of a lot of heart. The first Guardians, by the end of it, you truly believe they're all friends. And then the second one, I think it's weaker because it splits them up and they're not as together as much. And that's what's really good about this team is they feel like the most cohesive team in the MCU. Like, you feel like these people hang out all the time and the characters interact all the time. Like, they feel like living people that care about each other. And they argue sometimes like they're like a big family. And we've seen them through 3 whole movies. I mean, when they're in other MCU movies, they're in it for a bit. But, like, obviously their strongest stuff is when they're together. And with the holiday special, which I haven't watched yet, but I've heard it's pretty fun. But I'm touching mostly upon their 3 movies. Like, we've seen them grow together. Like, it was so weird for me watching one. I forget, like, Yondu's a kind of bad guy. Nebula is a bad guy. Like, they're not. But when you watch Guardians 3, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm like, oh, I completely forgot that's how that worked. Just because it's a true trilogy where you see things change and you see the characters change over time. I mean, it's weird for me to think Mantis didn't come in until movie 2. You're just so used to it at this point. I think that's what's really cool about these Guardians films is they're unlike any other MCU movie where because Gunn had the freedom to kind of do what he wanted because they were like the only space team in Marvel, he built like his own little section of the MCU that was like barely affected by anything. Like the Gamora piece is obviously the big piece, and I'm saying it blends in really well because it's like there is a thing affected by Endgame, but not everything changes. I don't know how to describe this properly. I guess what I'm saying is I hate it when we get movies like Ant-Man and Wasp, Quantumania, which I didn't go see. It was the first movie, MCU movie since 2015 I didn't see in theaters. I'd seen every movie since Age of Ultron in theaters. Oddly enough, I didn't see Guardians of the Galaxy in theaters, the first one. I thought it looked weird. I was a little kid. Thought the tree thing freaked me out, and I just didn't think it looked like my style. And then, Months later, I watched it on DVD, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite superhero movies ever, and probably my favorite MCU film. So that's there. Me and me and my being able to guess what goes on. I mean, it's like, I hated on Jokic, and now I love him. So maybe I'm not the best at first impressions, but regardless, at least reading first impressions is what I should say. I think it's really interesting because that's not what I was going on. My bad. Quantumania, it just feels like a movie that's a piece in a larger puzzle. It doesn't feel like you're going to go there and you're going to get a good movie, but it also feeds into everything else. It just feels like you're getting chapter 2 of this, not chapter 2, but it's like chapter 36 of the next MCU. The next MCU event. You're getting piece 36 of Secret Wars. Go watch the TV show that connects in. So in Secret Wars, when this happens and this happens, and I really like the way that Guardians of the Galaxy is like, no, you're watching a full movie. And yeah, like these characters tie into Infinity War. But if you just watch the trilogy, you could get complete experiences out of it and enjoy it. And if you watch all the movies they're in, great. Now you understand it even more. And I really like how that works. And I wish that's what the MCU went for more, which is just create interesting stories and characters that, you'll fall in love with. And then they connect in your big event movies. And then they're back to their own thing. Not every movie has to be some big world-ending piece, and I like that. I like that that's what James Gunn does. I'm worried about the MCU because I look at their upcoming slate, and I'm like, I'm not really that interested to see the Thunderbolts movie. I'm not. And that's what they're probably hoping is their next Guardians, where they're going to take like this lesser-known thing. But if it doesn't have any of the heart or the charm of Guardians of the Galaxy or really the uniqueness, it's not going to be. It's never going to be. And, I think down the line, people are going to look back, and I think people are already starting to look back and think this is some of the best stuff the MCU ever put out because it was true to itself. It was its own thing within the MCU. It used the MCU to strengthen it. It didn't make the MCU its main point. It was an excellent film series that tied into the MCU. It's not just a part of the MCU. I don't know if that makes sense. But I'm saying Marvel with these shows and all the new movies, it just feels like they're making little pieces of a puzzle instead of trying to just make great films that happen to tie together. Iron Man 1 is a great movie by itself, but it also ties into other movies, and that's cool. And I think James Gunn understands the way you can do that, how you can make complete stories and then have them tie in enough that you enjoy it, and it feels like a world that's lived in, but not so much that you feel like every movie's just a little piece and not, everything you wanted it to be. And so I'm really excited for him as the head of DC, what he's going to do, because I have full faith he's going to continue this idea of like pockets essentially in the universe, where it's like you have like Superman over here and you have Batman over here, and yeah, they're in the same universe, but they can have their own complete stories, and then they come together for bigger stories. And that's cool. That's how comic books play out, and that's how I think the DC movies with Gunn at the head are going to play out. And I think that's really awesome. That's what I want to see. I love the interconnectedness. I think it's really cool, but I don't like it when it hurts the overall singular films. If you're just making event movies, I don't care anymore. If you're only, if I'm really only watching your movie just so I understand what happens in Secret Wars, that's no fun. And MCU's got a big issue with their hands with Jonathan Majors and that whole situation. I don't know what's going to go on there. Doesn't look good. And, it's a real shame. But, obviously, if you want to look more into that, you can. I'm saying, who knows what's going to go on there. It's a bad situation. Do not like how that looks for Majors at all. I don't think that's, obviously the things that it said went on are not good things at all, and that's not good, and that would obviously, I would assume, make him have, probably be taken out as Kang, and that, that throws everything in a tailspin. So who knows what is going to go on with Marvel here in the future with their big event. Realistically, right now they're looking towards really the X-Men as their next big thing, because if this Kang thing falls through and they got to recast or whatever they do, or maybe they just pivot and go in another direction, who knows, but with the Guardians done, seemingly, it feels like, I don't know what's next for the MCU. I think really the X-Men is the last big thing I can see them pulling that pulls everybody back in. Barring an incredible Fantastic Four movie, we'll have to see on that. But I'm saying, like, really, because Spider-Man's on a bit of a hiatus right now, and it's like they know Spider-Man's their cash cow, and I'm being legit. I think really the only way for them to get the big market share back would be the X-Men, because I think James Gunn's going to go over to DC and really cook it up. Like, I think he's going to put out a really interesting Superman film, and I'm really excited for that. The Authority is the next movie after that, and like that's a very lesser-known team, which will probably mean the movie will be excellent, because James Gunn does really well when he takes lesser-known heroes and he elevates them to being your favorites. That's why I'm really interested in the Superman movie too, because I've never seen him with like a high, big name, a high caliber, like big name superhero like Superman. So that'll be really interesting to see how he does that, and then how he turns around and does what he's really good at, which is taking lesser-known characters and making them beloved with the Authority. And that balance of like the lesser-known and the big names, because he has like Superman and Batman, but then he has the Authority, and then he has Booster Gold. I'm like, this is shaping up to be a really interesting DC universe, and I'm really excited with what Gunn's going to do there. And to be perfectly honest, after this Guardians movie, unless an MCU movie blows me away based off what I'm hearing, I don't think I'm going to go to another one unless it looks great. I mean, I'll probably go to whatever Spider-Man movie they put out. But, I'm not really interested in seeing the Marvels unless I hear insanely good things. Maybe I'll go see the new Captain America because G really likes it. So, G said, if I know she's listening, you said we're going to that movie, so apparently I'm going to Captain America 4. But I don't think I'm going to go see Thunderbolts unless I hear amazing things. But with DC, I'm like, well, hell yeah, I got to see the Batman too. I mean, the Batman's like the best movie I watched last year, and one of my favorite superhero movies ever. I love the Batman. So, that's excellent. I got to see that. And then their universe is going to be, set up by the guy who just made one of the best superhero trilogies ever. I mean, it's probably the best superhero trilogy since The Dark Knight. It would be like the Avengers trilogy feels like a completely separate thing. Like it doesn't feel, it feels weird to compare that, but if you're looking at big superhero trilogies, it's like Spider-Man, the X-Men, the two sets of the X-Men, Dark Knight trilogy is the best one, obviously. The Avengers trilogy, because like I said, Ultron you can just kind of put in with the first one, or you could just count it as a filler and not really count it. And then I would say this, in my opinion, is the best trilogy since The Dark Knight. Is it better than The Dark Knight? That's wow. I mean, that's going to start a riot. So I don't even want to get into that today. Maybe I will eventually. But yeah. Definitely not. Got to have more time to think on that. I have to rewatch the Dark Knight trilogy. I haven't even watched Dark Knight Rises, sorry. I haven't even watched Dark Knight Rises. I know. I say I'm a Nolan fan, and I haven't even finished the Dark Knight trilogy. What a guy. What a disappointment. But back to this movie. The plot with Rocket, I absolutely loved. I thought it was beautiful how, we got to see his tale. I mean, it's obviously a very tragic tale. Beautiful is a weird word. But I'm saying it's a very tragic tale, and I cried during this movie twice. To be really honest, folks. I cried during this movie twice, and I can't remember the last time I cried to a movie more than once. This is a huge, I hardly ever cry in movies, and I cried twice in this. So this movie really was emotional, and it can do that because you know these characters so well. James Gunn wrote an excellent trilogy where you connect with the characters and you care about them and you feel like you know them and you've seen them go through things. And now when I watch Rocket and Guardians 1, I understand him more than I did before, and that's really cool. And I can't wait to watch the second one and feel the same way. And that's how I feel about really everybody. I understand them more with each movie. And so when I rewatch the other ones, I'm like, well, dang, I never realized that before. And that's just really good writing, and that's what makes really good movies. That's what makes, cinema, excellent classics. And the one-shot fight sequence in this movie is completely awesome, and I loved that. That was some of the coolest stuff I think the MCU has ever done, and I loved that one-shot fight sequence. That was sick. Great work. The villain is excellent. I love the fact that the Guardians movies, James Gunn understands, just give us some big prick villains. Ronan is a borderline comedy act in the first one. I was thinking that when I watched it. I'm like, he is comedic with how just dumb and naive he is. And you're supposed to, when you watch it, the more you watch it, the more you realize that he's kind of a joke. Thanos pokes fun at him. He looks like a child, like when he like makes his like he like acts like he's a child when he's about to cry, and like he's goofy, and he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be a goofy villain, and that's fun. That's part of the reason that first one's so fun. He takes himself overly seriously, and the heroes don't take him seriously really at all. I mean, the people on Xandar do because he wants to slaughter them all, but like he loses because of a dance battle, which then has him shoot a giant rocket into him that Rocket built, oddly enough. Well, it's not a rocket. It's like a big space gun. But you know what I mean. And then they hold the stones, and he says the classic line about them being the Guardians. Excellent work. Excellent film. And then, Guardians 2, it has a twist villain. But the twist's like an hour and a... It's like a little over halfway through the film. And he's just an awful person. And then this one, from the jump, it's like, yeah, High Evolutionary is an awful human being. And actually, he's not even really a human, but he's awful and terrible, and you should hate him. And you do. Like, you completely hate him, and you just want to see him get murdered. And then he does. And it's pretty epic. So, I guess I give props to Gunn, because while I love, like, a nuanced, he's kind of got something to him villain, there's also really something to be said about the just straight-up despicable villains, like Green Goblin. That is how High Evolutionary is. Where it's like, you are just an awful person. You have no good point. You were just terrible. You were completely terrible. And you torture Rocket and the other animals. And you were awful and I hate you. And then when he eventually gets the justice that you believe he deserves, you're like, yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. And I love that. I thought he was an excellent villain. Some people are not a little upset about the way Warlock played out. I was fine with it. I liked it. I thought it was fun. To me, I think this movie was obviously going to be slightly affected by the fact that we have to keep in mind, originally when Gunn's working on the trilogy, the MCU was poising him to kind of be a guy for them that brings in more space stuff in the MCU. He originally was going to head up more space central projects in the MCU. Like, he was going to do a trilogy of Guardians, and then he was going to do some other movies. So I bet Warlock was him setting himself up for a Warlock movie or maybe a Nova movie or something along those lines. But then, obviously once his relationship with Disney fell apart, then he was like, okay, well, I think he probably changed some things in the third one and reworked Warlock into this role, which I actually really liked. I thought Poulter did a great job too. I really like him. I can't wait to see him in more stuff. Hopefully this gets him bigger gigs because I think he's great. And yeah, that's really all. I thought I was not upset with that at all. I would much rather have High Evolutionary be the villain than Adam Warlock. I think the way they used Warlock was really fun. And it kind of reminded me of like Yondu in the first one, where you have this like little side villain that spices things up. And that's how Taserface was in the second one. And that's how Warlock was in this one. Like, I like having those little side villains that bounce off. And I really liked it. So I thought that was cool. I keep using the word cool. I need to use something else. I thought that was pretty epic. Pretty epic stuff. I thought it was good. I mean, I know some people weren't the fan of it. But I'm like, the more they do of High Evolutionary, the more I'm like, yeah, he's an excellent villain. So, that was great. Going into this, I thought two guys were going to die. My guesses were Star-Lord and Rocket. No one dies, and I actually thought during the movie, I'm like, thank the Lord. By the end of the movie, there's a moment where it looks like Star-Lord's going to die, and I'm really glad that didn't happen, because I'm like, no, the way you wrote this is it would feel wrong for any of them to die. Like, everyone has reached a point where it doesn't make sense for them to die within their character and what the movie was doing. It was like, emotionally, none of them were at the it's time for me to sacrifice myself point. So it just would have felt like forced, and I don't want that. I don't want them to force a death just because it's the end of the trilogy. So I'm really glad, they stayed true to the course and they did not do that. And I thought there was a chance Gunn was just going to kill somebody because it's like, yeah, screw you, Disney, you're not going to be able to use my characters. And he didn't do that, and props to him because, like I said, it would have just felt wrong. He left them all at an emotionally perfect place in their character arcs. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I'm really glad he didn't make any of them die just because. Man, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think this is genuinely one of the best MCU movies. It is a very pure film where it takes the fact that you know these characters well, and you care about them all, and it uses that to its advantage by putting them in emotional situations. And it's still got an excellent soundtrack. It's still super fun. I mean, it's really fun now that he's got the Zune because James Gunn gets to do music from, like, pretty much anything he wants pre like 2008, I think is pretty much where he's going off. Or maybe it's like 2005. But really, he's like, there's some 70s, some 80s, some 90s, some early 2000s. And he does a lot more, he bounces around a lot more than just doing like late 70s, early 80s music. And so I think that was a smart move by him to give him more area to work with. And I still really like the soundtrack. Less like recognized songs from me. Like I know a lot off Awesome Mixtape Volume 1. When I first saw the movie, I already knew like a couple of the songs on there. And then 2, I knew like 1 or 2 songs on there. And this one, I was like, okay, I think I know. Other than No Sleep Till Brooklyn, I'm like, I don't think I know any of these songs that well. Like, I might have heard this once or twice, but, other than that, I was like, other than No Sleep Till Brooklyn, I was like, this one is his most deep cut soundtrack. But I really liked it. I mean, I like all the movie soundtracks. I think 2 is probably my least favorite. I mean, I love me some Mr. Blue Sky. I love Come a Little Bit Closer. That's a banger. Bring It On Home to Me is pretty good, too. But this one is a lot more wide range of music. Do You Realize? That's a slapper. Gotta love that one. Yeah, I think one's kind of the classic, though. I mean, I love 1, Volume 1, but I'm talking about the music, not the movies. I mean, out of the movies, I think it's definitely 1 versus 3 for the best one. 2 is the weakest. I'm going to rewatch 2 for some point in the next week, and then, like I said, I'll probably watch the holiday special, which I know is weird to do in May, but I just want to watch all the Guardians stuff. And then I'll watch the Suicide Squad, maybe Peacemaker. And then, I don't know if I'll rank it. It feels weird to only rank like 5 things. Maybe I will. I mean, I rank things all the time. Might as well take advantage. But I'll definitely talk about them on the podcast because I'm doing a review of this. I don't know if I'll do a full-fledged review or if I'll just touch on it. But I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say, which is, to me, this is like a 10 out of 10. I don't usually give like number scores. I just usually give my thoughts. I mean, do I usually do number scores? I don't think I do. I think I just kind of talk about it, but I thought it was excellent. It was everything I wanted it to be, and like I said, it might be the last great MCU movie. I mean, really, other than a Spider-Man film, and, if they can really get their stuff together with the X-Men, maybe they're going to put Pedro Pascal's Wolverine. Who knows? I love Pedro Pascal, but, I think it's DC's time. This kind of felt like a big ending to the MCU for me. I think a lot of people are feeling that way too, where it's like the Guardians they love, and it's like, they came out to see this. It's obviously it's going to make more money than Ant-Man Wasp Quantumania did. And, James Gunn's going to go off to work for DC, and as a good friend of mine said to me, it's like, not a lot of people can name directors, but I think most people could tell you who James Gunn is. Because he always puts the beginning of the Guardians movies a James Gunn film, somewhere, and his name's very prominent because, Sean's in it, and you'll see his name pop up, and I think Gunn's a producer, I think in the second one and this one. I don't know if he's a producer in the first one. But I'm saying, people know James Gunn, and when his name pops up on a Superman trailer, people are going to go out to see that. And when, The Authority comes out and it's really good, people are going to be interested. And, like, Creature Commandos, all I know is that Weasel's in it from Suicide Squad, and I don't even really like Weasel that much. I thought it was kind of weird look. I mean, he kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I got nothing against character. I'm just saying, like, he's weird looking, obviously. It's kind of his whole bit, like, his whole gig. And even I'm, like, hyped for that show. I'm definitely going to watch it because the DC stuff's really interesting to me. I'm like, you're trying to just make the best stuff possible that interconnects. Instead of making the interconnectedness the cool thing, you're making good stuff that interconnects instead of the fact that it's interconnected makes it good. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it did. But, yeah, Guardians Volume 3 I completely loved, and it made me really excited for the new DC movies, which I know that's not what Marvel wants. But that is what happened while I'm sitting there. I'm like, I cannot wait for what James Gunn produces with DC because I think it's going to be excelente. And I'm very excited. Sixers, I guess before I say that, this is, it said at the end of the movie Star-Lord will return. I hope that's not the case because I think it was perfect the way everything ended. I mean, maybe they'll throw him in, like, Secret Wars, but I always think they're better written when Gunn's... It feels weird when, like, the Russo brothers wrote, like, I don't know. When the Shang-Chi director has to write Star-Lord, I just don't think it'll feel the same, so... I don't know. Just a thought. Like, when the Russo brothers wrote Star-Lord, he just comes off as a little more whiny and, like, dumb. Doesn't come off as, like... He doesn't feel as layered as he does with the Guardians, so... And that goes for all of them. I mean, other than, like, Gamora. I think they wrote Gamora pretty well. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say about it. I really loved it. I'm super happy. As far as movies from this year, it is definitely one of the best. And as far as movies that have been like, well, okay, my bad. As far as movies this year, like 2023 movies, it is the best one. It is the best one I've seen. Easily. I love Creed 3, but it's got to be, like, if I'm being honest with myself, this is better. And this is so great. And I love it. And I'm really happy with it. And maybe I'm going to do a big MCU rewatch. I haven't watched all the movies probably in like 4 or 5 years. So I might go back and watch all the MCU movies. I'll probably stop after Endgame. Maybe I'll go on to watch all the other ones. I own them all on Blu-ray up to Endgame, and then I own No Way Home. Then I'm obviously going to buy this. But I can just watch the other ones on Disney Plus, I guess. So maybe I'll do if I do a big MCU rewatch, then that means I will sit down and remake my tier list from the first ever, well, not really first ever Sort of Sporties. It was like technically, but at that point I just said it was like the movie awards, so it was before I had a name for it. So it was like the 0, whereas Sort of Sporties was like the first one, and that was like the 0th one. I know that made no sense, but regardless. We're going with it. All right, I'm not even going to put a different image up. I'm just touching on this. Sixers Celtics will play tomorrow. And tonight is Warriors Lakers and the Heat Knicks. Most important thing is that the Nuggets absolutely slapped the Suns last night, which was awesome. And I'm starting to think Jokic is going for that title. And I think there's a very decent chance it is a Nuggets-Sixers finals. And that would be pretty sweet because I think the Nuggets are going to win that. And Jokic will prove that he is that guy. He's the second best player in the league. And he's one of the best offensive players of all time. Like, genuinely one of the best offensive players of all time, in my opinion. People got to stop sleeping on Jokic. I mean, the Mark Jackson, not even putting him as top 5 MVPs, like, picks, like, that's terrible. Jokic is on a tear, and I think he's locked in to win the finals, and that makes me really happy. This was the only scenario, after the Cavs and Bucks both lost, for me to be happy watching the NBA Finals, is for Jokic to be in it. We're starting to move towards that. And still respect to Jamal Murray. He's been playing great too. Aaron Gordon's been a dog. Bruce Brown, MPJ. Got to love Mike Malone defending Jokic after the whole Suns owner situation, which is stupid. I don't know why Jokic is getting fined. That's completely stupid. The owner put his hands on him. I cannot believe that. That's stupid stuff. On another note, the Panthers have a Monday Night Football game this year, which is absolutely insane. I cannot believe that. So that is awesome. We got a Monday Night Football, and it's Bryce's home opener against the Saints. So that's really exciting. Bryce Young's first ever home game is going to be on Monday Night Football. I can't wait to watch that. And Bryce Young at this point is like probably already my second favorite quarterback in the league. I love him. He's so great. He hasn't even played a game yet, and he's already my second favorite. So another quick thing, if you haven't watched the Titans schedule release video, it's really funny. I would definitely recommend it. I think you'd probably laugh. So that was how they released their schedule. They asked people on the street to guess what the team name was based off their logo, and they got some pretty funny answers, and that was really enjoyable. All right, that's been this episode. I'll see you on the next one.